In this video, I'm going to show how to replace the front struts on this Ford Expedition. Located behind your front wheels, let's get started. Now with the vehicle safely raised and supported, use a 21mm socket, remove all 6 lug nuts, and then get the wheel off. Now with the wheel off, on the side of the knuckle you'll see a 10mm bolt and an 8mm headed bolt. Both of these have to come off. Take the bracket off, and then take the ABS wire off the knuckle. Now from the back side of the caliper you'll see 2 18mm bolts that hold the bracket and the caliper assembly onto the knuckle. We'll remove this whole thing and then hang it aside with a hook so you don't put pressure on your brake hose. I'll leave this one in a couple threads to take the bottom off, and this will hold it in place. With the bottom taken off, remove the top bolt completely. Pull the caliper assembly off and hang it to the side. Now from the front side, remove the rotor. If it's stuck on here and seized on the hub, use a hammer and tap between the lug studs, or use a 10 by 1.5 bolt to push the rotor off the hub. In the middle of the hub, you have this cap with some pliers. You can grab onto it, wiggle it, and remove it. Now use a 13mm socket and remove the axle nut. With a 21mm socket, remove the tie rod stud nut from the knuckle. The tie rod stud is actually broken free from the knuckle, so it's actually spinning the whole thing. So we have 2 options here. Either with a pry bar, we'll put some pressure downward, or use 2 wrenches to hold the stud and remove the nut. I'm going to put my 21mm wrench on the nut and a 10mm wrench on the bottom. Now if you're spinning the stud, you actually want to spin it in a clockwise direction as if you were tightening, and hold the mounting nut. Work it back and forth if needed to break free that rust. If the threads are fairly rusted, you could take a wire brush or a wire wheel and clean them up. That'll make the mounting nut slide off easier. You can also apply a little bit of rust penetrant. There we go. That's off. And because my tie rod stud is broken free, I can just push it right up and out of the knuckle. If yours is not, use a hammer, tap right here, and that will break it free. Now if you follow the knuckle up, you'll see where it connects to the upper ball joint. We have to remove this mounting nut with a 21mm socket and separate these. We'll put that back on, just a couple threads. This is going to hold it so that when this splits, it doesn't come out all the way. Now take a hammer on the top of the knuckle, that'll break this free. There we go. Now with the help of a pry bar, hold the control arm down and remove the mounting nut. Now gently let this up and pull the knuckle to the side. Now we have to disconnect the sway bar link, and you can do this a couple different ways. You could take it off the sway bar on the top, you could take it off the control arm on the bottom. I prefer to do it right here. What I'll do is I'll wire brush these threads, spray some rust penetrant, and you can use an 18mm wrench or socket. If you have to hold this, this is going to be an 8mm cutout right here. Well, it looks like this came off. Often what happens is the nut will spin with the stud, and you'll have to use a wrench on this and another one here to hold it, but looks like ours came off. Now at the bottom of the shock where it connects to the control arm, you have a 27mm headed bolt with a 30mm mounting nut. Remove this. All right. If you can, remove the bolt. If not, you'll wait until the top of the strut is disconnected, and then this will be easier. At the top of the strut, where it bolts onto the strut tower, you'll see 3 15mm headed mounting nuts. We'll remove all 3. There we go. break free all of them and then remove them all. And there's one. All right. Now what you want to do is pry down on the control arm a little bit. That's why we disconnected the sway bar link. This will give you enough space to pull the strut up and out of it, and then of course out of the vehicle. There it is. Take your new strut assembly, make sure you have it facing the right way, and slide it back in. Line it up with the top, push the control arm down, and slip it in. Take your strut assembly and make sure it's lined up with the holes on the top, and push it up and through. Have at least one mounting nut ready to start on so that you can thread that in, then let it hang and do the other two. And now we'll tighten all of these up. That's bottomed out. I'm going to leave it bottomed out on all of them because we're going to come back and torque these. All right. With everything lined up at the top, move the knuckle upwards and stick the lower bolt in. It goes through from the front to the rear. And we'll put the mounting nut on. I'm going to get this close, but we can't tighten it yet. You want to tighten this at ride height as well as the top bolts. So what we're going to do now is support the lower control arm, lift it up, and then we'll torque it. With a jack underneath the front control arm, let's raise it up. To tighten this lower bolt, of course you want to bottom it out, and then the torque is 350 foot-pounds. If you have a torque wrench that goes that high, go ahead and torque it. Unfortunately, I do not, so I'm just going to make it about as tight as I can estimate 350 foot-pounds with my air impact. The torque for these three upper mounting nuts is 30 foot-pounds. If you can't fit a torque wrench in here, just do the best you can. Now you can gently lower your support. There we go. Now with your sway bar link back through the sway bar, let's bolt it back on. This is the mounting nut that had the floating washer on here. So just don't confuse it for the other ones that go in other suspension components. We'll bottom this out. Torque this to 59 foot-pounds. Let's reconnect the upper ball joint. If you can't pull this down by hand, you can use a pry bar to help you out, just like when we removed it. Just like that. Have the mounting nut ready to go back on. Push down on the control arm so the stud can be pressed into the knuckle, and tighten up this nut. "85 foot-pounds is the torque for this mounting nut. The knuckle's going to want to spin, that's normal. And that's it right there. Let's get the tie rod stud back through the knuckle, push it down all the way, and we'll put our mounting nut on, bottom it out all the way. And torque it to 85 foot-pounds. That's it right there. If you have a castle nut style mounting nut with a cotter pin, put that in now. And to line it up, always keep tightening and never loosen. Mine is just a regular locking nut, so I don't need a cotter pin. Before I put my rotor on, I want to clean up this surface right here. You'll see this outer ring and the inner one. That's where the rotor mounts, and if it's not nice and flat, if it has corrosion or debris buildup, the rotor won't sit flat. So use a sanding disc or a wire wheel or wire brush, whatever you have that'll clean this up without removing too much material, and make sure it's nice and flat. Now with a collection bucket underneath, we're going to rinse this off. Apply a new layer of anti-seize to the surface of the hub, especially on those two ridges where the rotor actually sits, to prevent corrosion from building up in the future. Keep in mind though, you don't want too much or it will actually squish when you put the rotor on and it'll fling all over the place. So just a thin layer will do the job. I'm going to put some in the middle, although not as important. I do want to protect this surface so that rust doesn't build up. With this cleaned up, clean the backside of the rotor so that no rust and debris goes on here when it mounts on. Now you can put the rotor back on. And to temporarily hold it in place so it doesn't move around, I'm going to use an old axle nut, put it on here as a spacer, and a lug nut, just to hold it up onto the hub. Reinstall the axle nut, snug it up. The torque for this is 20 foot-pounds. To hold the hub from spinning, you can use a pry bar right in between the lug studs. That's it, 20 foot-pounds is not a lot. Now let's put the cap back on. Line it up and tap it into place. Now grab your caliper, slide it over the rotor, line it up with the knuckle, and have your 2 bolts ready to start back in. Let's get these bottomed out. Torque both of these bolts to 148 foot-pounds. Let's resecure these brackets on the knuckle. This one for the brake hose has a hook. You want to make sure it lines up with that hole. And then the larger bolt goes in here. And then next to it is the ABS wire with the smaller bolt. And now tighten both of them up. If your ABS wire came off of the brake hose, reattach that. And if for some reason your vacuum hubs came unplugged, this isn't secured with anything, so when you pull on the knuckle, it is likely to happen. Reconnect the vacuum hose. Make sure it's fully bottomed out. Let's get the wheel back on. Install all 6 lug nuts. We'll bottom them out in a cross pattern, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 150 foot-pounds. Once again, 150 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Here we go. We'll double check them all. And that's installed. Do the same to the other side, and don't forget to get in alignment.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.